You are listening to the Be the Bridge podcast with Latasha Morrison.
How you guys doing today? It's exciting.
Each week, Be the Bridge podcast tackles subjects related to race and culture with the goal of bringing understanding.
But I'm going to do it in the spirit of love.
We believe understanding can move us toward racial healing, racial equity, and racial unity. Latasha Morrison is the founder of Be the Bridge, which is an organization responding to racial brokenness and systemic injustice in our world. This podcast is an extension of our vision to make sure people are no longer conditioned by a racialized society, but grounded in truth. If you have not hit the subscribe button, please do so now. Without further ado, let's begin today's podcast. Oh, and stick around for some important information at the end.
Verses 10 through verses 17, but I want to give you my translation, a 2020 translation of what Paul is saying. This is what he's saying. My brothers and sisters, some from Chloe's crib have DM'd me on Facebook telling me that there are quarrels among you. What I mean is this. One of you says, I follow Trump. Another, I follow Biden. Another, I follow Bernie. Still another, I follow Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Trump crucified for
That
you?
snippet reminds me of Paul's instruction to Titus about selecting leaders. Paul says in Titus chapter 1, verse 9, and this is the contemporary English translation, they must stick to the true message they were taught so that their good teaching can help others and correct everyone who opposes it. Guess what? Paul was describing today's guest, Rich Villodas. Rich is a Brooklyn-born lead pastor of New Life Fellowship Church, which happens to be a large multiracial church with more than 75 countries represented in the Elmhurst neighborhood of Queens, New York. Rich holds a Master of Divinity from Alliance Theological Seminary. We are so alike in our love for reading, writing, and speaking about the intersectionality of faith, race, and justice-related matters. This husband of 13 years, shout out to Rosie, and the father of 2, wrote the awesome book, The Deeply Formed Life, Transformative Values to Root Us in the Way of Jesus. We're going to start our discussion by dealing with spiritual formation, but through the lens of a pastor who just happens to be Puerto Rican. I want to say shout out to all my Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. Rich is the leader of a multi-ethnic and multicultural church. Listen.
Yeah, you know, what I was trying to do, and as I was writing it, and when I was done, I realized, oh, I think I know what I'm doing after I wrote it. And it came to me like, this is an ambitious reframing of spiritual formation. And it's often the case that spiritual formation, and I've learned so much from the authors of this kind of area of the Richard Fosters, the Dallas Willards, the Ruth Haley Barton. It's often white people who have written about spiritual formation and such. And when it's done, although it's really incredibly done, I have found that much of spiritual formation emphasizes our personal life with God, the various spiritual disciplines, the practices. What I wanted to do was say, I want to retain those things. At the same time, I want to broaden our vision of spiritual formation so that we see particular areas of our lives in formational ways. And so how do we address matters of race formationally? How do we address sexuality formationally? How do we address matters of mission and justice formationally? And using, the contemplative rhythms and this call to interior examination, what I was just attempting to do is saying, I think we can broaden it. And so, I write about these 5 values, and these 5 values are often not held together in various ways. And so I'm saying, no, I think these need to be held together. And so I write about contemplative rhythms, racial justice, interior examination, sexual wholeness, and missional presence. And what my argument is, each value needs the other. And so, for example, to talk about race and racial justice and racial reconciliation, we need to have a life, a contemplative life with God for the long haul. We need a life of interior examination, not just to name the systems that are complicit with injustice, but to name our own narratives and stories and our own ways that we've been formed. It takes interior examination to do that. The same with justice and, mission. So I'm saying this is a comprehensive vision of what spiritual formation can be in this day and age.
Growing up in the South and in Southern churches, often diversity is framed around issues surrounding Black and white, or in other words, those that are part of the African diaspora and those that are of European descent. But a church that is truly diverse should be framed more broadly. And with that in mind, I asked Rich this question. Sir, and I know you've had to do this because you preach in a diverse neighborhood, and a lot of people want a diverse church. And so a lot of times I'm always asking people, why do you want this? Is it to look good, or are you willing to do the work of it? Do you want a diverse church, or do you want a reconciled church? Because there's a difference. And so, what? And for you teaching in a diverse neighborhood and multi-ethnic church that's also multicultural, that comes with a lot of challenges.
So many challenges. And to give your listeners a sense as to my context, Queens, 50% of Queens is foreign born. And so it's the most international of the boroughs of New York City. We have 75 nations represented in our church, 123 languages spoken at the nearby hospital, to take out, money at the ATM on Queens Boulevard, which, by the way, side note, our church building is in Coming to America. And so when you see Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall at McDowell's sweeping outside, our church building is 1 block away. You see it.
See, they're McDonald's. I'm McDowell's. Huh? They got the golden arches. Mine is the golden arcs.
I'm telling you, we will become friends because this is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, so we're in it. I like to say we're in Coming to America, and so our church is incredibly diverse.
Okay.
And because of that, it's incredibly challenging. But because we're trying to move beyond what I like to call just being a sanctified subway car. In New York City, subway cars are very diverse. And so, but a subway car is really a crowd of anonymous people in close proximity, a diverse crowd of anonymous people in close proximity. And it's easy for church to be that way, and the church to be more than a sanctified subway car. We are the new family of God, made, new in Christ. But it is a challenge for sure to preach in this environment. There are plenty of gifts and opportunities, and at the same time, there are challenges. And so, in our church, we have, Black Lives Matter activists, and we have Blue Lives Matter, folks as well, sitting next to each other, often unbeknownst to each other. We have, Never Trump and pro-Trump people in our congregation. And so it's funny, the caricatures of people who support Donald Trump are often seen in one way on social media. But I know in my congregation, which is probably 10 to 12% white, there are plenty of people for various reasons, fear, they're one issue voter, what have you, that they support Donald Trump. And these are people who I love and who don't fit into the standard stereotypical caricatures that we often find on social media. But that makes it difficult, incredibly difficult. And in our polarizing society, which is only becoming more polarized, preaching in this context in Queens is quite a challenge.
So, really doing community in the context of a truly diverse environment has its own attributes that can be rewarding and challenging at the same time. I'm sure you may be like me and wonder from not only a parishioner's perspective, but what this environment is like from a leadership perspective, especially as a pastor and teacher. What Rich says here is great. Check this out.
I've learned primarily that the gospel truly is good news for all people. I'm meeting with, again, people. Our church is not just racially, ethnically diverse. It's generationally diverse. We have, folks in their 70s and 80s, and we have young families and young singles, and it spans that, people who are coming from all kinds of educational and academic backgrounds. And, in our church, we have folks who are film directors and hedge fund managers. And then down the block from us, we have a homeless shelter. Mm-hmm. And so, and with all of that diversity, I've learned that the gospel is good news for all people. That's the first thing I've learned about preaching in this setting. I've also learned the power of story. There are lots of people who they don't speak English as their first language because of just, again, the international nature of our congregation and of Queens, but they really connect with story. And so my sermons are often, I get teaching and such, but I'm always trying to tell stories because there's something about story that unites hearts and joins us in our common humanity. I've also learned about the complexity of language and why, the simplicity of language, where there's certain things that I shouldn't say because my goal is to connect with people, not to come across a particular way. And I've learned the necessity of having other voices within the community speak so as to connect with those in our congregation. Again, I'm a Puerto Rican New Yorker, and our congregation is incredibly diverse. So we have a preaching team, and our preaching team is made up of a biracial man, black, white man, African-American woman, a Korean American, and an Indian American woman, and a Filipino brother. And that's, that's our preaching team. And so whenever someone preaches, they're bringing with them part of their own ethnic history and culture that the congregation needs to hear, because I can't speak to all people. We need a team to do it. So those are some of the things that I've learned about preaching in this context.
Diversity is nuanced and layered, which led me to this question. A lot of times, there are a lot of churches that are multi-ethnic, but they're not multicultural. Mm-hmm. How do you work on being both?
It's interesting. Dr. Corey Edwards wrote a book on the elusive dream. And,
I like her stuff. She has some good, great stuff out there.
And the premise of her book was a majority of these multi-ethnic churches, it takes on a particular white dominant culture.
Right.
So lots of churches are multi-ethnic, but they're not multicultural because there's just a particular way we're going to do it. And in our context, part of that is reflected in a number of things. Who's in power in our congregation? Who's making decisions in terms of the board, in terms of the staff? Is the staff representative of it? And not just the staff representative of it in terms of, people coming from different ethnic backgrounds, but generational backgrounds. I mean, we have, some first generation South Americans on our staff who have a heavy accent when they speak. And that for me is a value for us, that everyone's not going to speak with the same, American accent or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. This is a multicultural thing. In terms of expression of worship, this is something that for me that I've had to repeatedly disciple our congregation in, that there is no culturally preferred way of engaging in the worship service. And so for some people, they're shouting and dancing. For others, they're reserved. For others, there's, a flag on the side that they're waving. And which can be a bit confusing in our context. But what we're saying is,
I got to see the flag.
You got to see the flag. But I mean, at one point, there were flags all over. They're kind of now on the side of the front of the room now, on the side. But, there are moments when I preach, and I remember a black woman come up to me and she said, "Pastor Rich, you were just preaching today, and I just wanted to just say amen and shout and stand up." I said, why didn't you? And she said, "No, I don't want it." And so I got up the next Sunday and said, "Listen, first of all, this is going to help me as a preacher. If some of y'all just stand up and say amen and just stare at me as I'm preaching here, that's going to really help." But going back as a pastor, I have to repeatedly say, there is no one normative expression of worship. Bring who you are. I remember this Kenyan woman came to our church. She was visiting, and I was greeting people in the lobby. And after the service, I said, my sister, great to have you. Got her name. She was visiting, and she said, this was a wonderful service, but why wasn't there more dancing? I say that's a good. I say, well, you should have led the way for us. I know you're visiting for the first time, but if you come again, give expression to what you sense God doing inside of you here. But I think for me, as the lead pastor, I have to encourage that there's no typical way of just we bring ourselves to worship, and that's part of the gift and part of the complexity of gathering together in this kind of way.
Okay, so how do we deal with discipleship in this context?
Yeah, when I think about discipleship and race, I have a paradigm that I tend to draw from, and in terms of the various layers that we need to consider to have a comprehensive, robust, meaningful conversation. And so when I think about discipling others and creating a formational framework, I think about 6 layers. I think about a theological layer, a historical layer, a sociological layer, a formational layer, an ecclesiological layer, and the political layer. And for me, if you want to add a psychological layer on that as well, you can and make it 7. But for me, formation needs to happen along those lines if we're going to have a meaningful conversation about what it means to be the people of God in whatever setting we're in. And so it's often the case that people just look to the Bible and say, where do you see this in the Bible? And of course, that's helpful. We need to start there. But there's other areas of discipleship. And so for us, I have used that framework to do a few things. Every year we have a gospel and race conference, and you have been on my list, Latasha. I mean, we've had some amazing people there in the last number of years, and so we were supposed to have something this year, and obviously it got with COVID, and we're wondering about what we're going to do next year. But one of the ways that we've discipled, particularly our leaders, is every year we're inviting some world-class practitioners and experts in this field and addressing those areas of formation. Additionally, one of the things that we do, I just led a training right before COVID happened in the pandemic with 100 of our leaders. And the goal is to help them think through the ways that they've been formed, honestly. And so you talked about Pete Scazzaro and Genogram. And, I've learned much from family systems theory. And part of the book, I'm trying to connect elements of family systems theory into the conversation on race, because, we say at New Life, Jesus lives in your heart, but grandpa lives in your bones. And what that means is we all have positive legacies from previous generations, but we also have negative legacies from previous generations. And to the degree that we're able to name those legacies, we're going to have a hard time actually naming current reality and allowing the gospel now to transform our hearts and the ways that we live in the world. And so one of the things that we do on a regular basis whenever we teach about race and justice and reconciliation is, can you name the ways you've been shaped by your families of origin in ways that were conscious and in ways that were unconscious? And so one simple exercise that lead people in, and you'd be surprised, but you probably wouldn't be surprised. Maybe some of your listeners would be surprised by the level of difficulty it is to name the ways we were shaped. And so I put on a form usually, how did your family talk about Black folk? How did your family talk? Or what were the interpreted messages about, East Asians, Chinese, about Middle Eastern folks, about Latinos, about Dominicans? And I put this whole list down and say, what are the messages? And I remember one person in our congregation, a South Asian brother, and when it got to the point of what did your family teach you about Black people, he had the hardest time, not because he didn't know it, but for him to write it down on paper, this is what I learned about Black people, was the most difficult. And I had to look at him, write it, write it, brother, name it. but our ability to name things really is what's going to lead us to freedom and liberation.
Yes.
Whatever we can't name, we're still in prison to. And so, one of the ways we talk about racial self-examination, in terms of how we've been formed by our families of origin. We're teaching people lamenting. We're teaching people, how to connect the contemplative life to matters of race. And so, in the book, I lay out about 7 or 8 various practices that I try to form people in. But it often begins with not just the habit of looking within, but also the habit of looking behind us. Where have we been, and how is the residue of racial injustice, racial oppression still very much present in the world today? Still very much present.
Wow, this is such an incredible conversation. Hey, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Navigating the stress of sudden changes in income, health complications, and/or the loss of someone close can be overwhelming, not to mention the stress of this tense time of political and social disharmony. Honestly, at this time, we could all use a little help. Well, guess what? There's BetterHelp.com. That's better, H-E-L-P. BetterHelp.com makes professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient for anyone who may currently struggle with life's challenges. If that's you, you can get help anytime, anywhere. BetterHelp.com offers access to licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board-licensed professional counselors. We want you to start living a happier life today. So as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting BetterHelp.com/BeTheBridge. Join the over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's better, HELP.com/BeTheBridge. Don't fall into the trap of trying to help yourself. Get better help at BetterHelp.com.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's pick up Latasha's conversation with today's guest.
Now imagine, in this context, Rich as a leader also has to tackle the topic of what it means to be single. Listen to how he navigates this.
Yeah, our church, and again, in terms of the scope of it, our church is probably anywhere between, about 1,800 to 2,000 people who call New Life home. So I would say half of that are married and half of that are singles in our congregation. And in terms of how we care for singles, I think the first way we care for them is theologically care for them. And by that, I mean, we try to present a theology of singleness that goes beyond classic, don't do anything stupid or wait on the Lord. Right. Like, that's typically what singles hear in churches. Don't watch your sexual ethics and wait on Jesus. There's got to be more than that.
Yeah.
And so,
Thank you.
And so, first of all, I think, how do we theologically frame singleness, where it's not a stigma, it's a sacrament in some ways. It's a means of grace. Jesus was single, and Jesus was fully human, and I think that's the starting place to talk about singleness. Jesus Christ is single. Jesus Christ never, if I can use the language of Marva Dawn, who wrote a book on sexual character, she said there's a difference between genital sexuality and social sexuality. And social sexuality is, it's the ways that we connect with people, just sociologically. Genital sexuality is, the act of now sexual intimacy, sexual intercourse. And Jesus never experienced that, and yet he lived the fullest human life ever. And so the starting point for any theology on singleness is to look to Jesus. The other thing I talk about is singleness in terms of how we care for them is we try not to create not just a hierarchy, but unnecessary division where singles are always hanging with singles. And so we try to create these gatherings on a regular basis at New Life where married and singles can get together and be in relationship with one another. And it's usually the case in churches where the singles stay over here, the married stay over there. And we're saying, no, we need to create environments where that kind of classification, ministry classification, you're not going to find that in the Bible. And so we want to create not just intergenerational spaces, but we want to create these kind of spaces across your marital or, status or whatever it is. So, and then, we talk about sexuality and spirituality and the connection between that. But we're trying to offer a theology more than just wait on the Lord or don't do anything sexually stupid. There's something much more than that.
As a leader in any context, especially in this context, the concept of self-care is often lost. I can relate to what Rich says here.
For me, what waters my soul is reading waters my soul. And so I spend a lot of time reading, whether, novels or books on theology and formation. Those are the things that really water my soul. Also, the contemplative life in terms of rhythms of silence and prayer truly waters my soul. And now that basketball hoops are back up in the city, they took out hoops in our playgrounds during the pandemic. And, I live in an apartment in Queens. I got no backyard with the hoops.
Right.
And so now that the hoops are back up, just getting out there on the basketball court is watering my soul as well. So those are a few things that have been watering my soul these days.
Once our soul is watered, where does one find hope and where does one find peace?
Yeah, in terms of hope, I have found great hope in the people of God. And New York, we really got hit hard within the pandemic. And our church is 1 mile away from Elmhurst Hospital, which was featured prominently in the news in April and May because we were the epicenter of the pandemic. And so, I would hear the sound of the ambulance sirens just nonstop every single day, driving past our neighborhood on the way to the hospital. And all that, I found incredible hope in the resilience of the people of God, the ways that people were caring for one another, the ways that people were praying for one another, sacrificing for one another. We put together a COVID relief fund and in our congregation just to serve those who are losing jobs and are just economically just in very challenging positions. And the amount of generosity that people offered, for me, these are all hopeful things that when challenges and pressure comes, the people of God are going to be the people of God. And so I've been most hopeful by just the response I've seen, not just from my congregation. I'm in lots of conversation with pastors around New York City, and to see other churches stepping up to be the hands and feet of Jesus has been something that's brought about lots of hope. In terms of where I find peace, one of the great gifts in my life is connecting with pastors on a monthly basis, just a small group of pastor friends. And I have found great solace and peace in a monthly phone call over Zoom just to share about the challenges we're all experiencing, the questions that we need to discern, the hopes that we hope to step into. And so I have found lots of peace and wisdom through that kind of friendship. I think those are the things that have really not just watered my soul, but have formed me really well, even in the midst of this crazy pandemic.
Let's close out with this verse.
Yeah, I think my hope and wisdom are found in one verse in Colossians 1, which has become my life verse as a pastor. I got this verse, really, God gave me this verse as kind of like my life verse some 5 years ago when I had a bout of tuberculosis in my lymph nodes, and it was a pretty scary season. And the Lord gave me this verse where it says, Jesus Christ is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And the hope that I offer to people who are doing the work is Christ is the one who's holding this world together. And our ultimate hope is in Jesus Christ, not in the good works that we're doing, as profoundly good as they are. We will all die. We will all have our moment to do work, and then we're going to be with God in a different kind of a way. But Christ is holding it all together. And the word of wisdom that flows out of that is, because Christ is holding it all together, I don't have to. And what that translates into is, I can step away and rest and Sabbath and experience rhythms of renewal, because the healing of the world is not on my shoulders, is on the shoulders of God. And yes, we are participating, and yes, we are partnering with God in all this, but we have incredible limits. And so my encouragement and words of wisdom are, do the work, be involved, and at the same time create a rhythm where you can step away from the work to be replenished, to be renewed, and to be reminded that we're not holding it together, Christ is.
We are a species of its own kind, the churches. And one of the ways we show the world what's to come is by putting our trust and confidence in Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ.
Yep, Jesus Christ is where we put our trust and confidence. For many of you, a very diverse context is merely a way of life. But for some of you, there's a sense that you have that says this is a calling. Think about that, though. This is really more than just a calling for some. In this movement of racial reconciliation, this is a calling for all of us. Special thanks to Rich Villodas for sharing wisdom in his heart. His book, The Deeply Formed Life, Transformative Values to Root Us in the Way of Jesus, can be found in stores and on most platforms where books are sold. That's all for now. But until next time, let's build bridges and not walls.
If you are a member of the Donors Table, you get access to today's unedited episode. Go check it out.
Thanks for listening to the Be the Bridge podcast. To find out more about the Be the Bridge organization and or to become a bridge builder in your community, go to bethebridge.com. Again, that's bethebridge.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, remember to rate and review it on this platform and share it with as many people as you possibly can. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Today's show was edited, recorded, and produced by Trayvon Potts at Integrated Entertainment Studios in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. The host and executive producer is Latasha Morrison. Lauren C. Brown is the senior producer. Trayvon Potts was our transcriber. Please join us next time. This has been a Be the Bridge production. Be the Bridge, 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 be the Bridge.